Welcome to Forum 360 on Fusion, your PBS channel. This is Leslie Ungar, your host today. Thank you for joining us on our global outlook with a local view. We're co-sponsored by the Akron Jewish Community Center. A few months ago, we took a look at doing business in Cuba. When President Obama normalized relations to this country, Forum 360 looked at what it would mean for business people wanting to do business in this country that continues to intrigue us. Today we will take a different look at Cuba. Famous for its 50s cars and untouched landscape, our guest, a professional photographer, will share her photo journey to this country where you can eat salsa or dance the salsa. We welcome Amy Lambs Photography, to Forum 360. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, the first thing, well, let's start just with, there's a lot of countries. I think it's something like 200 or 300 different countries in this world that I couldn't name if my life depended on it. But why Cuba? Why did you choose to go to Cuba? What was it that called you to make this journey?
In my artistic life, I've always been drawn to contrasts and contradictions, and rusty things, crumbly things, things that are maybe not as they were originally intended to be seen. So Cuba is a perfect combination of all of those things. There are few, if any, regulations about building. The embargo has created an environment where there are no new cars, so they fade in a spectacular way. There's no rain, or there's no snow or salt like we have here, so the temperate environment creates just, to me, from an artist's eye, a lovely fading of paint. And there's bright colors. And
that in itself is interesting, a lovely fading.
Yes.
Which that truly would have to be said and seen by the artistic eye.
Yes, and that's what I see when I look. I don't, I see the world in slices. I see the world in still framed things. It drives my friends crazy because I will stop. I will see a picture and I will stop and I will take it. And my husband and my son have learned to deal with this, and my friends not so much. But Cuba specifically was so completely full of everywhere you looked had a contrast in color, or a contrast in texture, or a contrast in appearance. Could have been a salsa dancer walking down the street past a grocery store. Not something you would see here, certainly.
We're going to take a look at some of your photos in a few minutes, but take us chronologically. When you first went to Cuba, was it after Obama normalized relations and before Trump changed it?
Correct.
So you could go yourself, so there were
still restrictions in place, so the method by which I went was through an educational visa. It was a photography master class, and a testament to my particular individual arrogance was, I thought, I don't need this class. My photography looks like I want it to look. I'm just going to go because it's the only way to get to Cuba, and I want to go to Cuba. And I found out very, very quickly that there's a great deal for me to learn. And it was, I believe they call it a person-to-person. It's an educational visa, but that there's a person-to-person requirement. And so in order to fulfill that, our guide took us to other artists, Cuban artists, who are just now getting the freedom to keep the money they make from the stuff that the jewelry they make, or the paintings they make, whereas before they would have to work in a co-op. They now can have their own studios. So
let me ask you, okay, so let's go chronologically first. So you flew from where to where?
To, I want to say, Miami. And then we all gathered. There's a group of about 20 of us, and then we flew from there. I'm terrible with geography, I apologize.
So you flew straight to Cuba?
Yes.
To Havana?
To Havana, yes.
Havana, okay.
Yes.
So when you were landing, was it like landing in any other country? Was it different?
It was so very different.
And what made it different?
You're not allowed to photograph anything. It is illegal.
At the airport, you mean?
At the airport, you're not allowed to photograph the airport, the facilities, the planes, anything. You're not allowed to photograph the army, the military, or the police. That is completely forbidden. And so, whereas
Did
normally,
anyone on your trip try to
They were discouraged very, very quickly. The gentleman that took us over there has been doing this for more than 20 years, and so he knows all the ins and outs. And he shut it down really, really quickly, because your instinct is, oh, pull out the phone and, oh, this. No, you can't. You can't. And so it's dusty, it's low, it's hot, everything is sort of faded. And it's a very small, it was a very, very small terminal. We're used to, we've got, 3 driving distance from us. We could go to Pittsburgh, we could go to Cleveland. No, this is it. And it's low and it's small, and the process for getting your stuff was I think we were in the airport for probably 3 or 4 hours just waiting for our stuff to come in. And there was such a huge military presence. Again, not something we're used to, and it made me wildly uncomfortable to see people with guns in the airport, but that's what it was.
That's their life.
Yeah.
So you were working with artists in this one-to-one program. Could they speak English?
Some of them did. For the most part, they didn't. I was fortunate that my roommate on this trip spoke a little bit of Spanish, and then the gentleman that arranges the trip, we had an interpreter with us.
Now, did you find that when you met natives of Cuba, was there anything in particular that they were especially interested in? Did they ask you the same questions, or did they just have a curiosity about America?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Isn't that interesting?
No, they wanted to show us what they were doing. They wanted to share with us what they were doing and what they were accomplishing, and they wanted to feed us, and they wanted to give us coffee and rum and make us feel at home. I don't recall at any point being grilled about America.
Interesting.
It was very strange, because you grow up with a perception that's fueled by people getting in little boats and risking their lives and going 90 miles. You just assume it's a horrific place and everybody envies us and they want to come here. I don't recall a single question where people said, what's it like living there?
Isn't that interesting?
It was very surprising.
So you were talking about food. Before we get to food, then where did you stay? Did you stay in a hotel, what we would consider a hotel?
It was a hotel. It was a very nice hotel. It was right on the Prada, the very, very main boulevard in downtown Havana, Old Town Havana, that went directly down to the Malecon, which is probably something that everybody sees pictures of, that cement wall where people fish and swim. We were right downtown. It was beautiful, and it was every bit as nice as any hotel I've ever stayed in.
Now, price-wise, was it comparable to an American hotel?
That I could not tell you.
Because it was part of your
It was part of the package. Yeah, it was part of the tuition that we paid to go on the class.
Now, what about your meals? Were you free to eat wherever you wanted to, or did you eat with your
breakfast
group?
was in the hotel.
Did they make an American breakfast or a Cuban breakfast?
Sort of. There was always spaghetti and meatballs, and it was the strangest thing.
When I was in China, they would give you these things for breakfast, American, and you really kind of wanted to see what they ate, but they would give you what they thought
American.
you wanted, right?
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it was very strange. The coffee was awesome. And it was Americanized, but then they had some elements that were Cuban and some elements that they thought were American. Lunches and dinners were arranged for us by the tour guide. Again, he's done this, he's been doing this, he's a fabulous photographer, he's been doing this for more than 20 years, and he's created relationships with all these people in Cuba. And so it was all set out in advance of our trip, so we knew where we were going to be every night, where we were going to be eating. We could leave and go elsewhere, and we did several times, go do our own thing. But when we walked in, it was set up for us, it was waiting for us. It was a group of 20. They always had the table set and ready and waiting for us, and they would come around and ask us what protein we wanted. And then they would bring
what protein?
What protein? So you choose chicken, I choose lobster. A lot of people had lobster every night. There was lobster everywhere. And they would bring plantains and rice and beans and all the sides, and then they would bring you your individual protein, and then everything else was sort of family style.
Interesting. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how would you rate the food?
I've had some good meals in my lifetime, and I've done a great deal of traveling, and I would say this is among the best food I've ever eaten in my life.
Oh, interesting.
It was amazing. I did not expect it to be, and it was amazing.
Now, was there music everywhere?
Everywhere.
Well, there
Absolutely
really was.
everywhere. Absolutely everywhere, yeah.
And that's what you kind of think, but...
Well, you sort of, you hear the horns in the background, and that's exactly what it was like. People dancing, people working, people hustling, people, doing their thing, but there was also, everywhere you turn, there was music and people enjoying it.
Now the cars. The cars. We hear about the cars in Cuba all the time. Cars from before when Castro took over in '59. So Did you see your share, and did you photograph your share of old cars?
I thought it was an old wives' tale. I thought we were going to get there and there was going to be a car or two, and yeah, that's really neat. But really, truly, they're absolutely everywhere. There are contemporary cars from other countries that manufacture cars, but the American cars were absolutely everywhere. That's what they use as taxis, as main form of transportation. And they don't have auto parts stores. There's not a junkyard where they can go get parts. They have to make do. And if you look in the engines, they're completely Frankensteined. I mean, they don't look like the engines looked in the 50s, when they came off the assembly line at all.
Now, what did you want to accomplish? What was your goal in going on this photo journey to Cuba? It
was spectacularly selfish. I wanted photographs of these beautiful, crumbling places. And after being there for a few days, here you're out with your friends, you're out with your spouse, your kids, whatever. You're like taking selfies, taking a picture of your food. Even though smartphones have only been around for a few years, it's permeated the culture, right?
Yes. Yes.
So there's no cell service, there's no internet. And they're just now starting to get the internet right, and your face is how I felt when I got there. What do you mean there's no internet? I couldn't call my husband and tell him I was there for 2 days. So
not even in the hotel. It looks very American and feels American, but no internet.
No, there's internet. It's this weird lottery of 10-minute cards that you can go buy, and there's only so many issued, and they're issued on Wednesdays, and it's this weird, so you have to completely shift your thinking. So it took me probably 3 or 4 days to put my phone down, to stop taking, oh look, just put that down. And probably 5 days into the trip, I put my camera down, because I finally figured out that my motivation was to take pictures. And it was really sort of minimizing this entire culture and this entire set of people with their own destiny and their own story and their own experiences. They're not there for me to take pictures of. I put the camera down, and I finally got to enjoy the last couple days of just eating and drinking and dancing, and meeting the guys playing the horns on the seawall, and dancing with my friend in the street. And my goal, selfishly, was to take pictures of the people that I knew nothing about, and I came out of it having stopped taking pictures, and I think learned a great deal about the people that live there.
Now, is there an interest or a market in your photos from Cuba?
Yes. Yes.
And the interest is from people that have been to Cuba or have not been to Cuba?
A combination of both. People want to have been to Cuba, and they want to share the story, and they want to say, I was there, I saw that, I did this. Or people, was it really like this? Was it, is this representative of what's there? And it appears to be such a novelty. It really truly feels stopped in time, and slightly faded. Like, I think the phrase I used is that it is like an old photograph. Cuba is like an old photograph. It has stopped in time, and it has faded, and it's sentimental. But yeah, the interest is, I would say, equally between the people who have been and the people that haven't.
Today, we are taking a photo look at Cuba, that country of intrigue, just 90 or so miles from Miami. And we're doing that with a professional photographer who had a goal to photograph Cuba, Amy Lambs, and came out with a goal to truly enjoy Cuba. So she's going to help us enjoy Cuba through some of her photos. From your experience, do you want to return to Cuba, or would you take your same time, let's say, and want to explore other locations?
That's a tough decision. That's a tough decision. I would have stayed had they let me stay. Had that option been available to me, I would have not.
So when
left.
you went, you were only approved to go for a certain amount of time?
We were approved for 8 days, yeah.
So you didn't have a choice of staying?
No. And there's, the obligations that one has at home that one can't neglect. But had I not had a family to take care of or responsibilities here, and the opportunity was available to me, I literally would have never left.
So tell us, before we look at your photos, so that they will perhaps come to life even more, the people. What did they look like? What did they sound like? What can you tell us about the people?
They were, oh my gosh, they were so warm, and they were so kind, and they were so generous, and everybody wanted to feed you or dance with you, or take you for coffee, or my roommate and I took it, this is a great example, my roommate and I took a pedicab ride. I don't speak Spanish, she did, so she interpreted for us, and he gave us this great tour around the city with his experiences and his viewpoint on things. And then his apartment was right across from our hotel, and he took us back to his apartment and he showed us what he was working on, and you know, he's remodeling this and doing that, and we left and we had dinner with the group, and I was telling the leader of the group this story, and I said, if anywhere else in the world I would have been, you know, kidnapped or murdered or whatever, you expect sort of a bad thing to happen. You go to some stranger's house, what am I thinking?
Right.
What are we thinking? But he said, you are at greater risk from the other tourists that are here. He said, you are at no risk from these people. They love you. He said, in 10 years, you knock on that guy's door, he's going to make you a meal, he's going to introduce you to his abuela. You're family now because you had a conversation with him and you spent time with him. They view time and conversation and family, I think, differently than we do.
Now, did you feel the politics of the country? Did it feel to you different being in a country that's not a democracy? You know, we kind of grow up in a democracy. We just kind of assume every place is like us. You know, I kind of thought that in China before I realized that you just can't go around telling young people they don't have to listen to the government, you know. But we're just kind of raised that way. So,
sure.
So in what ways did it feel different than living here?
The first couple days I was really terrified to walk around with my photography equipment. It's more money than they'll see in a lifetime. I don't have particularly nice equipment, but it's still more money than they're going to see in their lifetime. And again, this gentleman who's been going there a very long time, he said, you're at no risk from the residents here. The thing that was different was you're not allowed to photograph the police. You're not allowed to photograph the military. We participated in the May Day parade, which is kind of equivalent to our 4th of July. And it's all the armed forces, everybody in all of the services marching, and he arranged for us to be a part of this parade. And it was the one day you could legally photograph the military or the police. But I, on several occasions, stepped where I shouldn't have stepped, and they had no problem physically manhandling me and shoving me back where I needed to go. And you're surrounded by people with guns, and suddenly I'm this foolish American with blue hair wandering around where I shouldn't be wandering around. You feel entitled wherever you go. I'm safe, I'm an American, it doesn't matter. And that was, I think, the first or second day we were there, and that really brought it home. Like, you can't just go do whatever you want. Here, there's that entitlement. Like, I am safe. I am an American citizen. It doesn't matter. They don't care where you're from. We didn't get in any trouble, but I towed the line. I went like, okay, I cannot mess around anymore. It felt very, very different.
So why don't you take us on a photo journey for a couple minutes of some of your pictures, and tell us what we're seeing, and perhaps why you photographed that particular picture, what you were thinking at the time, or what you think now when you look at this picture.
So normally I don't photograph people on the street, but part of what this whole trip was about was learning how to photograph people on the street and creating a relationship with the people that you saw. And this particular gentleman.
Before you go on, is there any way, since there isn't the internet and email, is there any way, if you wanted to stay in touch with anyone that you met, is there any reasonable way to stay in touch with them?
No, we've tried. There's this weird, like, medical personnel have email addresses. They're allowed to have email addresses, and there's a black market for email addresses. So there were a couple of people that I gave my business cards to, and said, you know, stay in touch, send me an email, and nothing has come through. And there were a couple where they said, if you email me here and put my name at the top, I'll get that email and I can email you back. It hasn't happened. We tried, it hasn't happened.
So even though your goal was to build some kind of relationship, you can't keep it once you're...
You can't keep it once you're gone, right? If I were to go back, any one of those people would have me in their home and make me dinner and, you know, play music for me, but we can't stay in touch. And actual snail mail takes months and months and months and months, so we never tried. This gentleman was the lighthouse keeper. There's a lighthouse, Fort, and I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on the name, Fort something, and it's right across the bay from downtown Havana. The lighthouse was built in the 1500s.
Wow.
And
and we think something's old here, right?
Know, right? The 70s, who wants to buy that? And this gentleman was lovely and charming and gave us a tour, and I didn't understand a word of it, but my roommate, you know, helped me translate it for me. we were asking him about his life. I was asking him about his life. My roommate was translating, and this is him thinking, trying to answer my very strange questions, because I asked questions about infrastructure and paying your electric bill, and like, because I wanted to understand how it worked, and he was baffled, like he didn't understand why I would be asking those questions. But he was a lovely, lovely man. This was the view down from the lighthouse, and you can see people down just on this little bit of rock fishing and swimming. I'm not sure if that comes through or not.
Now, did he only work in it, or did he also live in the lighthouse?
He only worked there. I don't believe he lived there. This is the view from the parking lot of the lighthouse that's downtown Havana, and I have several friends that could tell you what kind of car that was. I couldn't tell you.
But it was
it's
old.
Yellow.
It was yellow and old.
It's yellow and old, and it's convertible, and it looks really cool next to the palm tree. So this was our first night. The restaurants there are very fascinating. Everything.
Now, who's eating in the restaurants? Are they the locals, or are they tourists? Or
a combination. So you can't legally own a restaurant. Everything is government owned and government run. If you run it out of your house, they call it a paladar, which is a fairly common Spanish word. It's in your house, you can run it, you can have it. So there are people whose entire homes have been remodeled to be restaurants, but right there, that far away, would be the owner's bedroom.
And can the locals afford to go to these restaurants?
Yeah, oh, they were very reasonably priced. Okay. Yeah, very, very reasonably priced. So these are the street cats. The restaurant was upstairs, and they were just waiting for the garbage to come out. There were probably another 30 cats over here that you can't see next to where the garbage bins actually were. So that caught my eye. Again, contrasts. And this is pretty standard. We were talking earlier before the show about infrastructure and OSHA and regulations, and this is a really super great example of I start to really feel like a not very nice human being, because I visually enjoy this so much, but my heart breaks watching how they live. So each one of these is a titled piece of property. Like, they can own that one little boob right there, and that's a titled piece of property. But there's no air conditioning, there's no screens in the windows, there's no I don't know how to describe it, because it's not quite abject poverty, but compared to what we're used to every single day, you think, oh my gosh, how do people live like this?
Now, is it true then that they don't have TV in their homes?
There are some, like if you would walk past, everybody leaves their doors open, so you walk past in 4 or 5 apartments, maybe the 5th one would have a TV, and there would be a group of people sitting around watching it. So it's not common, but it's not completely unheard of. Maybe more than that, but that was what I saw walking around the city. And people, it's standard to wash your clothes in the sink and hang it outside on the balcony, and it's so completely different and outside of my ability to grasp that you feel like sort of a country bumpkin cousin walking around going, holy cow, people really live like this. And then you feel entitled and bad about yourself.
Let's take a look at one more.
Sure. Let's get past, because that's kind of the same. This is a great example. I zoomed in on one of the rooftops. This is, again, this yellow square is going to be a titled piece of property. And this is a woman, she was dancing with her dog, and it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and they were on a roof dancing with a dog.
I love that. I love that. Let me ask you a couple questions. I'm going to ask for 1 or 2 answers in the minute or so that we have remaining. Did you miss anything from the States when you were in Cuba? Besides internet?
Besides the internet, Target.
Well, it was a big deal in Mexico when Walmart came, so I do kind of understand that. What would you have liked to have brought back with you that you weren't allowed to?
Some of the food.
Well, for me, when I was in Jerba, it was a camel, a baby camel. I really, really wanted to.
Did not see one of those, but.
What was your biggest surprise?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can distill that into one word answer. The people, I think, the people.
The people, in a good way.
Yes.
The people in a good way.
They were amazing.
And since you have been in Akron, you are originally from California, but since you've been in Akron for a while, so are you Skyway or Swenson's?
Oh, Swenson's.
Swenson's. And the best thing about Northeast Ohio?
Family.
And the three best things, in my last question for you, three best things about Akron.
The three best things about Akron, oh my gosh, the artistic community, the growing food scene, and again, I'm going to go with the sense of family, or the value of family and community that we have in Northeast Ohio that is not necessarily present in other states.
Thank you. The small country of 11 million people has given us the conga, rumba, mojitos, black beans and rice, and Havana Nights. Cuba, known for its white beaches and tobacco fields, is more a part of our daily discussions than ever before. The Cuba-U.S. relations are now kind of normalized. Forgetting politics, our guest today has showed us that Cuba is a land of intrigue. You could say there's a photo op at every step of the way, but now we learn that it's better if you don't photograph every one of those opportunities. You may enjoy it more. I don't know about you, but these pictures have made me want to just leave and go to Cuba. Thank you to Amy Lambs for joining us on Forum 360 and making a country we've read about in the past come to life today. Thank you.
Forum 360 is brought to you with support from Electric Impulse Communications, Kim and Harvey Nelson, Rubber City Radio Group, Akronist.com, Hudson Cable, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Forum 360 supporters, and the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron.